Welcome to the webinar. We're going to talk about trends in financial literacy education, particularly using customizable stock games in personal finance, economics, and business classes. And we're also going to talk about the finance lab concept and how it works. We're going to start out with an introduction to me and our company, Stock-Trak, and the website that we're really focusing on, personalfinancelab.com. Then we're going to work into the current status of financial literacy education. So basically, we're looking at a national and state level of where we are with personal finance, economics, and business curriculum. And then we're going to work our way into trends and best practices. How are the most successful schools tackling these topics? Talking about what a personal finance lab is and how it works, what subjects it works with. And we're going to also work our way into how you would actually build a lab at your school with some of the approximate costs. So first, about me. My name is Kevin Smith. I'm the Research and Operations Specialist at Stock-Trak. Our company has been a leader in stock market simulations in high schools, middle schools, and universities since 1990. That's when we launched the world's first virtual trading application, the first online stock game. Me personally, I have my master's degree in economics from Concordia University in Montreal. My research interests were game theory with an emphasis on career development and personal finance, where I was specifically looking at how young people choose their career paths and allocate their resources when they leave school and become young adults. I currently am based in Chicago, Illinois, where I grew up, and I work with a lot of schools here, working with teachers to develop curriculum and lesson plans. The family of sites that Stock-Trak works with, it was used by over 750,000 students last year. We had over 19,600 contests created by over 14,200 teachers in the last year, so we do work with a lot of schools, a lot of varied types of schools, a lot of different types of class sizes, different subjects, etc. Over 8 million students have used one of our various sites since 1990. And you can see the logos at the bottom. These are our biggest platforms that we use: howthemarketworks.com, wallstreetsurvivor.com, nationalsms.com, virtualstockexchange.com, simvest.com, and investing101.net, in addition to our main university site at stocktrak.com and our new high school site at personalfinancelab.com. Where we started about 5 or 6 years ago is we see a lot of headlines like these. U.S. schools get a failing grade for financial literacy education. States fall short teaching financial literacy. American students struggle to demonstrate financial capability on an international stage. Or this one in particular, they looked at 15 of the biggest, the more developed countries, and they find that the United States just kind of hit the middle of the road. We're really not doing as well as we need to be. So where we started with this is we wanted to improve this as much as So this is where we started from. We were seeing all this bad news, and we wanted to turn this into good news. So we started doing our homework on basically what is the problem, why aren't we doing better? Basically, we started at the national level. We started looking at what at the national level do different organizations who champion financial literacy advocate. For personal finance in particular, we started looking with the Jumpstart Coalition. They've been publishing a set of personal finance standards for high schools since the 90s. When we talk to teachers, we talk to states, it seems to be kind of the anchor of what most states rely on when they publish standards for personal finance. But we also found out the NBEA, the Business Education Association, and the Council on Economic Education also publish competing standards for personal finance. So one of the biggest problems off the bat is that teachers are getting told three different things by three different people. Some stuff overlaps between these, but the emphases are completely different, and the actual layout of how they recommend teachers approach these topics are completely different. When we looked at economics, the Council on Economic Education, they are the biggest name. They've been around since the 70s, and they've been publishing standards pretty much the entire time. Most states that publish standards for economics have a lot in common with the National Council. But again, there's also competing standards published by the Business Education Association. And this is, again, a bit of a problem where there's still a lot of confusion on what's supposed to actually be in a high school economics class. For business itself, the NBEA actually has quite a lot of market share, where a lot of teachers listen to what they have to say. Focusing on accounting, management, and marketing topics is the one we were looking at in particular. However, when we actually look at the state requirements for business classes, they're kind of all over the place. None of them really follow the NBEA standards to the letter. The ordering is shifted quite a bit, and it's basically district by district is setting things up completely different from each other. In the business realm, there's also another set of national standards published by the advanced CTE. So basically, right off the bat, one of the biggest problems that we're finding is that when we talk about financial literacy in the United States, it's not very well defined, even at the national level. A lot of states are doing things differently from each other. A lot of regions are doing different things from each other, and a lot of it's being left up to the individual districts and how they want to tackle these topics. So we moved down a level, and we started looking at what different states are doing, what's working and what doesn't, at least at the state level. So the biggest state we looked at was California. And from the standards point of view of personal finance, they don't even publish state standards, let alone making a requirement. So in California, districts that teach personal finance, we find, have been adopting the Jumpstart standards. However, in most cases, personal finance is being taught in conjunction with at least one other class. So be a personal finance / economics class, or it's part of the social studies curriculum. It's being moved around quite a bit, and we haven't seen the same setup in any two districts in the state. They do make economics a required class, so districts are required to at least offer it, but it's not required for all students to take. One of our biggest sources for actually evaluating the different states compared to each other was a study published by Champlain College, and they really were looking at, in each state, how many hours of financial literacy education was the average student getting before they graduated. And in California, basically none. While districts are required to offer economics as a class, not many students were taking it, and between business classes, economics, and personal finance classes, most students were getting absolutely no exposure whatsoever. So they're doing very poorly. Texas has a different story. Texas was the next state we looked at. We do work with a lot of schools in Texas as well. They do publish standards for personal finance that districts are required to implement, and they implement standardized testing to make sure that those standards are being met. Interestingly, they actually publish two conflicting sets of personal finance standards. One set is part of their social studies curriculum, and another set is part of their business curriculum. So a business teacher is going to be teaching a different set of standards than a social studies teacher, both covering personal finance. Economics, also a required class for graduation, and they do also implement standardized testing. And Champlain College noticed a world of difference. Students in Texas, in general, were getting quite a bit of exposure to financial literacy, basically because their states were required to implement it. Again, we saw a lot of economics and personal finance classes being merged, but we also speak with a lot of schools that were teaching personal finance as a standalone course. The Champlain College study gave them a rating of a B. And finally, Utah. Utah is the last state we looked at. They require all students to take a dedicated personal finance class to graduate, and they implement standardized testing. Same thing with economics. Students need to take an economics class, and they have standardized testing in order to graduate from high school in Utah. And the Champlain College study basically gave Utah an A+. They said that Utah went above and beyond, and they are very well preparing their students to enter the world after they graduate. So our next step when we were trying to figure out what can be done to improve financial literacy education was to actually start looking at how financial literacy classes are being taught at the district level. And what we find is that financial literacy kind of sits in this intersection between the math departments, the social studies department, and the CTE programs. If you take a look at actually the individual classes that we consider part of financial literacy, they're generally plotted somewhere along this spectrum where district by district, the teacher who's teaching is coming from one of these departments, leaning from one side or the other. A lot of states have personal finance being taught by a social studies teacher, sometimes math teacher, sometimes CTE teachers. But the main thing is that all of 6 of these topics that we were looking at have quite a lot of overlap when it comes to the actual subject matter. So when we look at the schools that are doing it well, it's schools that have the teachers who are able to blend pieces from one into the other. That means a personal finance teacher is probably going to be borrowing some lessons from both economics and accounting classes when they're explaining how things apply to personal finance. And this also works very well because for students, it's a constant reinforcement of one thing they're learning in one class is applying directly to another class. So this actually fed right into what we were already working on, which is the stock market games, because there's really one activity that applies very well to all 6 topics, and that is stock market games. It draws heavily on the skills from all of these interdisciplinary areas, which means that as students are actually using stock market game in any one of these classes, they're being reminded of the lessons learned from their other ones. So if a student's using this as part of their personal finance class, every time they make a trade and they start building their portfolio, they're reminded of the same stuff they were learning in their personal finance class while doing the same kinds of activities. But at the same time, the way the students approach the game is completely different between classes. So a student who builds a portfolio as part of their personal finance class is going to look very different compared to a portfolio built as part of an accounting class. That's because the students are applying different types of lessons learned to the same activities. So this constant reinforcement actually works really, really well. And the states that tend to do a lot better when it comes to financial literacy are the ones who actually have been using stock games the most, which is great news. So when we were looking for good news, we did find some. First, financial literacy classes do work. The states found that the schools that were having financial literacy classes in high school found the students were better prepared to tackle financial issues later in life. Trading simulations also work. There's been several studies coming out in the Journal of Financial Education over the last 12 months that talk specifically that using trading and stock market games in class are helping students remember everything else they were learning. We've been working with several universities have been doing studies on classes at the college level showing that, yes, it is a constant reinforcement, and when it actually comes to making students more confident in investing, they've actually found that girls, after using a stock game, get a lot more confident than the boys do. We kind of suspect that's because the boys tend to go into this a little overconfidently to begin with. But either way, it's great news. The other great news that we like to see, they do work. We survey every student who uses our site every year to get their impression of how they thought it went with their class. Our most recent survey showed that 99% of the students who use a stock game said it added value to the class, virtually everyone. 94% recommended their instructor continue to use a stock game for all the future students in their classes, and this is across different subjects. And 93% said that it increased their confidence level when it comes to savings and investing. And as we said before, girls tended to actually say it increased it more than the guys did, which is great. So we want to put this together. Basically, we found that students learn really well through the process of playing the stock game. The game's part of a very good context for the subject matter. They're interacting with real companies. They're playing around with real data. Students learn a variety of other important skills. It's not just how do you actually invest. It's how can you do some research. How can you use a spreadsheet to put your data in a graph. How can you do the math skills required to build a balanced portfolio. Students develop connections with the content and positive memories. This goes back to what I was saying before with that interdisciplinary angle to it. A student who's using it in one class is going to remember what they used when they use a stock game in another class. There's a lot of cross-feed going back and forth. And those positive memories come from things like the class rankings, where students can see their ranks compared to the returns of the other students in the class. Every time I talk to a teacher at the end of the semester, they're always amazed at how much their students got into their rankings, where it might not even been in the forefront of their minds when they're setting up the game, but for the students, it makes a very big deal. And the games grab students' attention and actively engage them. Again, with those class rankings, it pulls them and it keeps them in. With the live market data, it keeps them engaged with what else is going on in the class. We have forums built into our sites where students can actually post messages to each other, and these get more and more active as the class goes on. And teachers tell us they hear the students talking about these stock games even outside of class. They'll find them checking their portfolio and doing a little bit of trash talk with the other students to see how they're in first place or somebody else is moving up. The other good news we'd like to read, this comes from the Yale Center for Teaching and Learning. Basically, active learning works. Most teachers already know this. Experiential learning has been the trend for the last few years because it works so well. So, when we put it all together, financial literacy classes work. Stock market games work. The games work. The experiential learning works. So, what we found for the last piece of the puzzle is that business and personal finance teachers are realizing that their high school probably has some sort of chemistry lab. They probably have some sort of biology lab. If they have a good CTE program, they might have an auto shop or even a culinary arts lab. And what they're realizing is they can do the same thing by building an actual personal finance or a financial literacy lab. And this is a dedicated learning space for these kinds of topics. And it's the same idea behind the biology labs and the chemistry labs. It's creating that dedicated space where when a student walks into this room, they're thinking about financial literacy. And if they're in this room for more than one class, there's that great cross-flow where those overlapping topics start coming together. So they're turning their average boring classrooms like this one, and the students who are basically falling asleep. Probably the worst thing I read recently was I was reading an article talking about something, I don't remember in particular, but it used the idiom, as boring as a personal finance class, into this, which becomes the most exciting room in the school. You get the tickers, you get the LCD screens, you get the data coming in to really bring it to life. And this you can tell is going to be the most popular room at the school. In fact, this school that we were working with, they started by putting the ticker and the LCD screen in the classroom, but it became such a focal point that they actually put one on the outside of the room too. And the reason is because it makes students want to come here. The students going through the walls want to go to this classroom. The teachers who are visiting want their students to take classes in this classroom, and it becomes almost a prestige point for the administration and the teachers. We have this. Our school can support this. This is really where business and financial learning is happening. And this is another school that we worked with recently. And you can see they have a couple tickers. They have one again on the outside of the room, one on the inside of the room. They have a couple of these what we call market boards pulling in different types of market data. And you can see in both these last two cases, the school actually put a glass wall to make sure that it got as much exposure to the rest of the building as possible, because it does become so cool. And this is another school we worked with in Nevada called Churchill High School. And they have basically the most common setup we see with schools, where they get an ice ticker going across the screen, the top of the room, with the company logos, the live market data, and they also have a couple of LCD screens that are pulling in live market data. You can also rotate these to show school announcements or other information that you might want to show. And this lab concept, the personal finance lab, it's really popular, first of all, with business CTE programs. These programs were the first ones that we started working with when they were building a lab for themselves. I think the first school to actually build a lab was based in Texas, and they were building it as part of a new career and technical education center, where they were setting it aside as, alongside the culinary arts lab and everything, this was the business and finance lab. And it became more popular as the business and finance academies. As they started seeing those first schools come through, it got a lot of attention because the parents love seeing it. And the same reason it's the same reason why it started spreading to magnet schools, because magnet schools like to have that coming in. But in the last year or two, the schools that have been getting the most interest are the schools that have been in states that require a financial literacy class and private schools. What all these have in common is there's usually some sort of funding for that hardware, but we're getting more and more interest for other parts of it from smaller public schools that are looking for the best educational resources they can get in the curriculum side of it. So a personal finance lab itself consists of a few pieces. The first and most important is the curriculum. Business, personal finance, economics, social studies, investments, math. These are the classes that are usually being taught in one of these labs. Next is the virtual trading application. This is the stock market game itself. The stock market game is the cement that holds these together. It's the foundation from which you can start building those interdisciplinary connections and start seeing the results of teachers working together. Next is scrolling tickers. Those are the real eye candy that go across the top of the room. And the interactive LCD screens are also one of the most important parts. These are the customizable pieces that can show class rankings, they can show school announcements, they can show all kinds of different things. And fun educational posters. This is the easiest part to get because I'll show you later. There's some really good places to get some free posters which form the cornerstone of most labs in their early stages. So the first part, the curriculum and stock market game, we put together. This is our bread and butter. This is what we focus on. And we built this site called personalfinancelab.com to bring it all together. It combines our customizable stock game with our embedded curriculum for business, personal finance, economics, social studies, math classes, and the business includes the accounting, management, and marketing curriculum. Basically, our emphasis is we did not want to make the problem worse. We did not want to have another set of competing standards or another set of activities that a teacher needs to build their lesson plans around. No, we took it the opposite direction. Every piece of this is completely customizable for your class. This means if you want to use lessons from this curriculum library, there's over 300 to choose from, but you customize it. You mix and match what you want your students to do each week to line up with what you want to do in class. These lessons have integrated videos, there's articles, there's interactive calculators. Basically, you pick and choose which ones you want your students to do week by week, and you can grab them from any subject. So if you're teaching a personal finance class, you're free to grab a couple extra topics from accounting if you just want to make them available for your students, even if they're not required. There's a built-in investing course. So in any class, you can just throw in some extra investing topics so students get a little bit more help with the stock game part. The whole idea here is making it as customizable as possible so you don't have to bend to this program, the program bends to you. The next most important part is we have built-in assessments. At the end of each one of those 300 lessons, there's self-grading pop quizzes. And teachers get a real-time progress report. So they end with a 3 to 5 question pop quiz, and you can choose whether students can retry these quizzes for a higher score, or if it'll save it to your permanent grade book the first time they try it. Better yet, it also has built-in complete assessments. So at the end of each unit, at the end of each week of activities you give your students, you can add in an assessment that will borrow questions from all those previous activities and put them together into one big extra test at the end to make sure your students understood the whole unit. And of course, there's full teacher reports. There's over 10 reports to choose from, logs for each student's activities, one-glance class status, grade books, and a whole lot of other stuff. When it comes to the stock game part, there's a ton of pieces of the stock game available. Stocks from over 30 countries, ETFs, mutual fund. We even added cryptocurrencies. There's options. There's bonds. Basically, it's a full-service, top-to-bottom stock market game that's designed to be used for the classroom. One of the best parts that we have of it is there's built-in note-taking. So you can actually enforce that your students need to write a sentence or two every time they make a trade. And this is really where the magic happens, where your students start really applying what they're learning in class to what's going in the portfolio and getting that really good cross-flow. This makes it automatic. Students can't edit these notes, so they can't change their rationale later. And this plays really well into one of the most common activities we see. Which is where the teachers will have their students build reports towards the end of the semester discussing their rationale for all their trades, how the portfolio went, and how it actually interplays with the class topics at hand. So here's an example of what we like to see. What we want to see is that your students start thinking about their savings and spending habits and the business implications of all these things. So we have a basic comment of, I'm going to the store to buy some food. And we want to transform this into, I'm going outside in my Nike shoes, Wrangler jeans, Abercrombie & Fitch t-shirt to the Bank of America ATM to get cash, then driving my Ford car on Goodyear tires with BP gas to Walmart to buy Charmin toilet paper, Crest toothpaste, Coca-Cola, and Ben & Jerry's ice cream. Then I'm stopping by McDonald's and Walgreens pharmacy for grabs of Lipitor prescription and some Revlon lipstick. They start paying attention to what products they are buying, and how they're interplaying between each other. Where is their money going? And the fun part is with some of these, with the stock market game, they actually start understanding how these companies are functioning in the real world. Usually Charmin and Crest here are both owned by Procter & Gamble. They have the same stock ticker symbol. So when they start researching their spending, they try to start using a buy what they know for their portfolio. They're seeing how some of these companies are working together in the background, even though they're using different brand names. And when it comes to personal finance topics, it works really well to understand basically where is my money going? How am I spending? How has this changed over time? And using that whole change over time is one of the successful ways of building a portfolio. When you see a company is doing better than it was last year, that could be a good sign of growth. So the way it really works with the stock game is the first step is the teachers create their custom stock market contest for their class. You choose everything. Most importantly, you choose things like the trading dates. What dates do you want your students to be building portfolios? Can they borrow money? Can they short sell? Can they day trade? Can the students see each other's trades? Are they required to take notes of each trades? Basically, it's pretty straightforward, and if you're not sure what to do with any of these, we have default settings for what the most popular settings are for each class, but you can move these around as you see fit. Second step, once the class is already set up, you can create a custom assignment for your class by selecting from over that library of over 300 activities. This is what it looks like. Basically, you'd say, I want my student to read this article. You can look at the article first if you want to. We do list the standards if it applies to any. And you can check this box for retries if you want them to be able to retry for a higher score. You can leave it unchecked if you want it to save their grade to the grade book. Third step, once your class is set up, you will get a link that looks like this one up here, which you will give to your students. They just need to click this link and they create a username and password in order to log in. That's all there is to it. And that way your students you'll know who all your students are, they'll be in your class, and there's no fussing around trying to figure out how to get in. It's compatible with Google Classroom single sign-on. It's COPA and FERPA compliant, so if your students are under 16, they can't enter any personal information even if they want to. And things like email address are really just used for password resets, and they're not saved after the class ends. Fourth step, once your students are in, this is where they start learning. They start building the portfolio using stocks and mutual funds and bonds. While they're building the portfolio, they're working through these lessons that you assigned them. And they have a progress bar showing how far they've come. At the top of the screen, they have their portfolio value, they have their percent return. Most important for the students is they have their class ranking. You can see here there's a few different ways they can look at their portfolio. We try to make it as clear and easy to use as possible. These charts are color-coded, so students can easily see where they're making money, it's green, or they're losing money, it's red. There's trade buttons to trade this position right away. They can switch between day charts, month charts, year charts. All of this data is exportable, so your students can work with this in any spreadsheet program if you're working through that in class. In addition to the stock market game itself, there's a ton of extra research tools available in it. Quotes, charts, news, financial statements, analyst ratings. There's over 23 data points, and I think this is outdated because we've actually been adding more since then. They can find income statements, balance sheets, cash flow statements, historical prices. What are analysts saying about this stock? What are some of the biggest stocks in each sector? What news stories are mentioning any of these stocks? And a lot more. We tried to set it up so students can do all the research they need to do for their portfolio right from inside the platform. There's also a bunch of interactive personal finance calculators. So with these, we would give a student a tool, like this one is an investment return calculator, and we would give them a scenario they need to solve. So how can you get, after inflation, an extra $200,000 in the next 15 years? What kind of investment do you need to make? How much rate of return do you need to expect in order to realize those goals? Our other ones that we have is a rent versus buy. Where is your break-even point between renting and buying a house? How can you build a budget for your house? How can you save up $1 million by the time you turn 65? And these are all interactive. As they move the slides around, there's graphs showing how all of these move with some different scenarios. So with and without inflation, with compound or simple interest, and a lot of other different measurements like that. And with the assessments at the end of each of these articles, they have to work through scenarios that require the use of that calculator in order to solve. So this is one of our sample lessons is dealing with balance sheets, where we give them sample balance sheets from Apple and Google, and then we ask them to find certain information from certain years. And one of the most important parts that we have is, just the basic stuff of how do you read this. They don't have $375,000 in total assets. They have over $375 million in assets each year, to try to get some of the sense of the scale of some of these companies that they'll be trading. The next component after the stock market games is the actual hardware that would be part of a lab. The most visually appealing is the tickers. These are the ones that all of the teachers love to see in their class. You can see these tickers have the logos of each company. It has the company name. There's 2 rows of data here with the name and the price information. Full color, and they last basically forever. There's 2 main standard sizes that most schools get. One is an 8-foot ticker and one is a 16-foot ticker. You can get them in bigger sizes in increments of 4 feet. So some schools that really are building a lab from scratch will often get a ticker that goes across the whole top of one wall. To get a ticker, every ticker you have has a $499 data license. So that's just basically the stock exchanges require any device that's displaying data to pay a data license. And an 8-foot ticker would cost you $4,500 plus shipping. A 16-foot ticker is closer to $10,000 total to get that into your school. And your ticker is going to show quotes and logos, headline news. You can even configure it with class ranking, school news, date, time, and even the basic weather information for your school. The company who builds these is called Rise Display. You might be able to find cheaper prices for tickers from another company, but basically the cheaper ones might be monochrome, so they look like they're from the 80s. They probably won't have the 2 rows of data, and they won't have any good warranty. We like working with Rise Display because it's all built in the US. It's all really good quality, and we've heard great things from every single teacher that's worked with it. The next component of your lab are these wall-mounted LCDs. This is where you can configure them specific to your room, to your school. So you can even have a couple different LCDs in your room, and they'll be showing different data. So this on the right here, this is what we call the school news and events, where basically you configure what you want showing on here. You can have it showing your school announcements. You can have TV streaming on it. You can have school announcements showing on it. You have weather, time, everything else. This other one here over here is called a market board, where you can basically pull in different pieces of financial information in. So, some basic stocks. This is a watch list showing some of the currencies and market commodities going up and down. Over here we have actually a watch list that the students in the class built, where they wanted to track 30 different stocks that they thought were the most important to pay attention to for their own portfolios. And these are entirely customizable, so you can grab bits of one, put it into another, and they're endlessly customizable. So we have streaming words of the day for personal finance topics, topics of the day for accountancy topics, just general investing terms of the day. And again, you basically set these up kind of like a PowerPoint presentation, where you choose what you want to be showing for how long and what hours of the day. So you can have it show market board during your personal finance classes. You can have it showing accounting terms during your accountancy classes. And you can play with those as you want. You as the teacher get an admin panel where you can configure it. If you already have a screen in your classroom, if you have a TV that's already available, all you would need for this is what we call a data stick, where it basically is a HDMI stick that you would plug into your TV, and then you need to connect that to the wireless at your school, and then you can stream the data into it. Just like the ticker though, if you're using any of these market board datas, you would need to pay another $500 per year data license. If you're just using basic stuff like school news or your class rankings, then you wouldn't need that data license though. And the last component is posters. This is also usually the first component that teachers will start using right away because they are free. The best posters that we found are provided by the Federal Reserve Education Board at Atlanta, frba.atlanta.org/education. They're 10 inches by 40 inches. You can grab as many as you'd like. They'll ship them to you for free. So here's a couple of the examples that we liked, and They're free, so you may as well get them, and this is usually the cornerstone of where you start turning a regular classroom into a financial literacy hub for your school. One of the teachers we talked to, we like this quote, completely transformed the learning experience. Students love it, and I'm thrilled with the increased level of student engagement. This actually came from a college, Jonathan Wales University, where one of the teachers was using it as kind of part of our first beta testing group about 2 years ago. If you want to get your lab started, here's the steps that you need to follow. Step 1, planning and budgeting. Identify what subjects and student clubs can be used in the lab. So we were saying that the personal finance, economics, and business classes are the most common ones. Start talking to the other teachers in your school who are teaching those subjects to see who could be sharing that lab space. Next, start evaluating the actual space that you have available for your lab. Things like the walls, the ceilings, windows, electricity, etc. Basically, drywall walls are often really easy to work with because you can run wires behind them. Drop ceilings, again, you can run wires through the drop ceiling, so they're also easy to work with. If you're using a ticker, you're going to want it pretty close to the ceiling, which means that you're going to have to run power somewhere close to the ceiling. So drop ceilings are usually easy to work with, but you can always talk to your building to see what they can do. You'll also need an Ethernet cable for those tickers. If you're working with the LCD screens, those are more flexible. They'll work on a Wi-Fi connection pretty easily. When you put in a ticker, you're going to want that to be visible from the outside of the classroom. So if you have any windows available pointing into the school, make sure it's visible from there, because that's what really draws students in from the outside. Again, that's really eye candy. You don't want the tickers and LCD screens at the front of the classroom where you're actually doing instructing, because they can get to be a little bit distracting during the actual instruction time. Once you have an idea of what you can actually do with your space, then you can start getting quotes from vendors, and we can help you with that. We know a lot of the vendors who work with this stuff. For the lab software itself, that'd be us. And then once you have some quotes, you can prepare some budget and grant requests. There's a lot of funding available for this kind of thing. The first schools that we started working with were getting money from CTE and Perkins funds. A lot of schools that we worked with the last couple of years are working with some state level and local sponsorships. Like the state of Arkansas, for example, that has a Securities and Exchange Commission, has been funding a lot of personal finance projects throughout the state. Local banks love sponsoring this kind of thing. So we work with a lot of schools that would ask us for a 3-year quote. That way they can go to a local bank and ask them to sponsor the lab for 3 years at a time. And we're also working with several schools doing proposals to go through donorschoose.org, which is a crowdfunding site. While all of this is going, while you're working on your grant requests or getting your quotes and everything, you can start taking advantage of the free resources to kickstart your lab. We have our howthemarketworks.com stock game with a sample of our curriculum. That's 100% free. It uses advertisements to support the site. And you can request those free posters from the Federal Reserve and the free workbooks from nefi.org. Both of those are really great free resources that are kind of the cornerstone for some of the early labs we worked with. Step 2, as some funds start to become available, you can upgrade. So first step, switching from the How the Market Works site to the personalfinancelab.com site license. That's $995 a year for up to 100 students at a time. This gives you full access to the business, personal finance, and economics curriculum. This is where you can start working with the more robust stock game that has a lot more available. And then you can also start configuring any existing LCD screens you have to start displaying some of that financial data and class rankings. So basically getting a little more flexible, starting to really get that financial feel of the lab, and getting a little bit more serious with what we have available. This part you can usually work into most schools' annual budgets if you give them enough notice, and you just kind of have to work with your administrators. And next, you would actually start finishing your lab. So once you have some of those grant requests coming in, you can add the scrolling stock ticker. The 16-foot ticker is the most common one schools get. It's at about $10,000, including shipping, with a $500 annual license. You can replace any existing LCD screens you have in your class with larger, more commercial-grade screens. The reason to do that is if you run those widgets and things on it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, you'll start to get some serious screen burn after a year or two. There's some other ones that are provided by the same company that provides the tickers that are basically designed to be on for 10 years at a time, and they're really worth it. Then you can also upgrade your personalfinancelab.com site license for more class subjects. As you can get more teachers to buy in, you get more school students involved. You can even start running student investment challenges for prizes that require certain lessons that can cover your entire school. And the most rewarding part of all is when you walk into your classroom and you're greeted with this. You have the happy students who love being there. You have the interactive tickers and the LCD screens that make it the coolest room in the school. And then teachers that we work with say it's worth it every single day when they walk in. If you want to get a demo of the personalfinancelab.com site,